originally from Washington, D.C., and I'm a Dunbar High School graduate. Sometimes when I read about Dunbar or talk about Dunbar to people in Washington, uh, they sometimes think that Dunbar had an elite group of kids who went to Dunbar, and that is not true. Kids who went to Dunbar were from working class families. You could raise the question, what did their families do? Many of them were clerks in the government, worked at the post office. Some of them were skilled laborers. Of course, Washington has always had a professional community because Howard University was here. But all those kids that went to Dunbar could not come from their homes. They came from working class families. And it's interesting that the culture of the school was such that it stressed excellence, and the scores that kids made at Dunbar High School were higher than any scores in the city. The number of kids who went to college was higher, the percent was higher than the white schools at that time, with segregation at that time. In addition to that, they won more scholarships than anyone in the city. And many of those scholarships were not to black schools, but they were scholarships at northern schools along the East Coast. One could raise the issue as to what happened to Dunbar and what happened to the school system here. One big issue is the issue of culture. Now we know culture involves a lot of things. It may involve your religion, may involve really your language and so forth. But the culture I'm talking about is the part of the culture which is ordered behavior. And so you had many people striving at Dunbar. They were very accomplished people who finished first graduate at Naval Academy. I could go on and on and on. I hesitate many times to talk about this because it's just an unbelievable situation if I talk to people about it, particularly in Ohio, where I'm living at this time. It's an unbelievable story, and I very seldom would say anything on the record about it. The school systems in Washington were segregated, as many of you know, up until 1954. But I taught at several schools, Easton, Woodson, and Garnet-Patterson. It was always interesting that the parent-teacher meetings, which were held in the auditorium, were filled up. And the biggest problem that the principals used to say we had was keeping the janitors too long in the building to close the building up because we had to pay them overtime. But parents were constantly engaged. They wouldn't leave the school until they talked to the teacher. And they came to get information, not to fight the teacher. The first person on my paper route when I was 14 was Mr. Goodlow, who was a butler at the White House. And the communities that we grew up in were stable communities, clean communities. People had small homes at that time. They did not have a lot of wealth as some of the black homes have today. But the community was a stable community. You could sleep on the front porch. There was no crime in the community. In fact, I never even seen a police in the community at all. I never heard of anybody getting shot, anybody killed. You could stay up. Many times, groups of boys who were teenagers and I used to be standing up in the community, 11:30 at night. Nothing was happening in the community that was destructive at all. Safe, safe, safe communities.